What's going on, everybody? Zach here from Zaxternaut Glass. Today we're doing another glass blowing tutorial. I'll be taking this Citrine, I just unwrapped a pound. This is a uranium glass. It's a borosilicate color from Molten, and I'll be doing a blowout. I'm gathering it up right now, handling up with a 7mm rod, and I'll be gathering it up until I can do the blowout and stretch it down to about 11 millimeters. That's the outside wall diameter, and each bead that I showed at the beginning there is very close to about 22 millimeters long. So I'll be sizing them up against the calipers as I go and trying to really make them as even as possible. At the beginning, I actually took the rod, I put it on a scale. I wanted to check on exactly how heavy the rod was, how heavy the beads were, and make my best guess about how much glass I could get, or how many pieces I could get out of the piece. So what I ended up measuring was 51 grams. Each of my beads are between 3.5 to 4 grams, and I ended up getting 14 beads out of the blowout. There's a little bit of extra glass on the ends of the blow tubes still, so I probably could have gotten 15 if I had sectioned it down a little bit more evenly at the middle. But as you can see, we did the first half of that gather, and gathering it up, it was bobbing a little bit, and then you saw me come back in and heat it up and even out the gather. While I was evening out the gather, the handle really ended up kind of offset. So here I'm gonna add another handle to it and then just press the rest of that into the gather. When the rods are uneven and the handles kind of bob like that, it can be a little more difficult to gather things evenly, so the process can be a little slower when that happens. But now I'll be getting that handle on there, as you can see. And I did speed this section of the video up just so that we're not watching me gather glass for 10 minutes. There you can see the last of that rod get in there. And then I'll heat the whole gather up and I'll roll it against my marver for a second in the background. The rolling it against the marver, I'm really not trying to press against the marver too hard. Actually, what I'm doing is more pressing my two handles towards each other. And once it's even, I grab my paddle and I'm gonna push that little nipple where the first handle got cut off, and then I'll really flatten out the end. This will give me a good surface to push the hole into for the blowout. And then we're gonna get that gather hot enough to push all the way through. I have a pointed reamer there, it's pretty much a pencil tip, and I roll it against the marver again and push all the way to that other handle. The tip got right all the way through to the clear, so then I know I can start that seed bubble all the way at the end. I grab that prepped handle out of the kiln. It's probably around 30 mil, pretty close to the size of that gather. I push it in and then tug. That helps me stretch the glass while it's still hot a little bit before I even puff. And then now I'm doing that first puff. I gave the gather some heat, and the first few puffs here can be very difficult. Citrine's a bit of a stiff color, so it does flow very slowly at the beginning, but you really just gotta soak the heat in there. Make sure that inner core is ready to move, and then the bubble should blow out evenly. Yeah, I'm out pausing a little bit, letting that heat homogenize, and you can see that inflate just a little bit. The gather just started to round out, but it really didn't start to grow too much. I did film this live, so every so often you'll see me talk to the camera. I got rid of that because you don't need to listen to my ventilation system while I do the tutorial. Just wanted to give a clean description of the whole process. There's another blow. Really kind of left this section of the video as long as it could be, so you could see how long it takes to get the heat in there and really start puffing out the gather. And there, I did clip it there, but we've got a little bit more of a good glow on that one, and it really does start to inflate this time. I think we do one more puff after that. You can see it's a nice even bubble. I'm pretty sure at the end here, the handle in my right hand ends up kind of getting a little off center. So this last puff here, I end up with a slightly off-centered end, and it is something that kind of I end up evening out later on, and I'll try and point that out when we get there. But you can see that handle just start to bob a little bit. But now I'm going to go straight into stretching this down. I probably should have straightened that out right now instead of continuing on with the stretch. It would have saved me a little bit of work at the end and probably sped my process up a little bit at that point. But over the course of a couple heats and a couple stretches, I'm going to try and get this very close to the size that I want, and then I'll be cutting it in half and getting it into two handles that are a little bit more manageable. But the process of getting a section of tubing to stretch evenly is really just slowly building up heat, trying to keep your two hands rotating at the same pace, and not letting it get too out of center. You can let it flop around a little bit, but you're really trying to make an even heat base and not twist it up more than anything. As you can see, really bobbing back and forth, going from one side to the other, and then I angle it so that the torch flame is like a little bit wider. As you angle the piece, the flame starts to distribute itself across the wall a little bit more. A little bit more of an even heat, a slow heat. As you can see, that's kind of flopping around and getting uneven, and I'm just about done with being in the torch there. You see me kick off the outer flame. And now I'll just try and use gravity to let it straighten out again. And give it a little tug. Really wait for everything to lose its glow. You don't want any real hot spots when you're trying to pull it out like that. As you can see, that's a pretty good stretch. I'll end up heating up the two ends and trying to stretch them again here. And I do use my marver to kind of help tell the glass where it needs to be, just giving it that cylindrical, nice, true shape. As you can see, I'm heating about half of the piece this time, just to get that little bit of a knuckle worked out and stretched out to a more straight diameter. There we go, back to the marver again, and I'm just peeking down the back side of that as I roll it carefully, really gently against the back side of that marver. Just trying to straighten it out ever so slightly. And I'll get to the other side, since I had a chance to straighten out that section that I was talking about being a little bit uneven. And as you can see, there's a little bit of a bob on that side as well. And I'm going to use this as a chance to straighten out that handle as well. Just trying to make everything as even and straight as possible. Taking your time to keep things straight really does make your whole process a lot easier. Everything bobbing in the flame can really cause one side or the other to get hotter, and the hotter side wants to flow more and the cold side doesn't, and then your bubbles all end up being a little odd. Yeah, once again, heating up pretty much half of the whole blowout, and I'm going to be stretching it down and breaking it at the center and adding a blow tube to the the piece with the solid handle right now. There, once again using the back of the L marver, just trying to straighten everything out. A little bit of a tug. It's not perfectly even. I am going to stretch it down a little more, but I believe at this point, there we are. I'm going to put a constriction right at the center. And like I said, I still have one solid handle on there, and then the large end with the blow tube that I did the blowout with. That constriction's just gonna stress the glass out a little bit and give me a spot to crack it in half. Just want to thin the glass a little more. Every so often, if you don't thin this glass enough while doing this sort of crack, either it won't break or it breaks into the color and you waste some of the stuff you've prepped up. So now that one with the solid handle, I'll flare the end to match a blow tube. And I'll get that into a manageable section that I can actually make the beads with. And you see I'm using the back of my jacks. I always use that to even out the flare as I open tubes like this. Now we're going to get the lips of those pieces as hot as we can, nice and ready to flow together. Push them, really get the heat in there to work out that inner wall. I'm just trying to make sure I get all the acute angles from the inside of my blow tubes worked out, because I don't want that glass to want to crack and fall off the tube. It's usually not a problem with work that's as light as this. There isn't much glass on the end of that tube, but once you start working bigger pieces, you really want to make sure those connection points are happy and ready to hang on to the weight that you're going to put on it. You see I'm blowing into it. Expanding the glass a little bit really helps work out that inner wall. Another little puff coming, I'm pretty sure. Or maybe not. Just on to the next step. So there you can see I've got the calipers out. I'm just checking against one of the beads. I had a few on the workbench in front of me, and I just wanted to make sure I was setting the calipers to the right size. Like I said before, it's 11 mil, so now I'm trying to stretch that piece down to the exact diameter that I was looking for, rather than the halfway point that we used to section down the two pieces and get everything into a little more manageable handfuls. As you can see, matched it to the calipers. We got very close to 11 mil, and that's what we're looking for. I try and just come back in on any like slightly thicker spots and stretch them down to the thinner diameter. And I'm being careful not to overheat this at that point, just so that I don't stretch it beyond where I'd want and have to collect up that glass again. So there, got the calipers out again, just checking it, making sure that the thicker spots that I wanted to stretch down are at the size that I wanted. As you can see, I'm heating up the end, giving it a little puff. Trying to stretch that glass out a little before I go in and open up the end. So now I'm heating that end up. I'm focusing the flame on that thinner spot. The thinner spot is actually solid, so I'm trying to get it hot so I can blow a bubble through it. So now I've got my blow hose, and this is going to give me the freedom to kind of watch the bubble grow as I puff. So that makes it a lot easier to puff until you have a nice even wall. And once I have that even wall set up, I'll be able to blow that hole out on the end right in the center. spending a bit of time setting some heat in there so I can get that glass to move evenly. So I'm really heating up that end until I can get that round bottom, and then we're going to heat up pretty much as much glass as I want in the whole bead, about an inch back, and then I'll roll it against the L-marver while I puff. This is a good technique for tubulating in a really even kind of cylindrical form. So here against the marver and twisting and turning and puffing and letting the marver force the glass that's trying to expand into that cylindrical shape. As you can see, there's a pretty nice even wall. Now we're gonna focus that heat right on the end and puff out a hole. So I'm gonna pop that right in the flame. And often once you pop in the flame, there can be a little bit of glass that's a little bit rough, kind of some boiled stuff that got very thin on the end. And picking that away can be important so that you don't leave any rough glass that's not wanting to melt in. I'm using my jacks to open that up. The jacks have a really narrow tip, narrower than this pointed reamer, and it helps me open up the hole to begin with, and then I can switch to this graphite reamer and kind of push it against the marver and roll, which will open it up into the nice cylindrical end that I want. The jacks have a little bit of wax. I'm throwing some more beeswax on them fresh so that they like to slide. Get that heat, really making sure that lip is the hottest part so that the rest of the tube can kind of support it. Just kind of take a few steps to get it to that nice shape. Bring it back against the marver as well, just to use the marver and the reamer to really give it that flat wall. Using them in conjunction with each other and rolling and really being gentle here so you don't make any weird divots and waves and bumps. You can really get a nice perfect shape. I'll use my paddle a little bit right on the L-marver. This gives me 3 sides to kind of push against. Now that that's opened the way I want, I'll just get one more measurement with the calipers for the length. I'm pretty sure I was going for about 22 millimeters. And here you see I'm flaring a little blow tube. And I'm going to attach this blow tube as a cold seal. As you can see, it's opened up. I've got it close to the size of the tube that I was going to attach it to. And I'll get that blow tube nice and hot, and the edge of the color is just going to be warm. And then I'll push them together. That way I can crack that off later. This cold seal really just is solid enough to hang on while I'm working, and then easy to stress it out, flash it in the flame a little bit, and tap it on something hard on the workbench and remove it. Now I just measured that against the calipers. I have the calipers sitting on my workbench. I just wanted to get a rough idea of where I wanted to flame cut these 2 pieces apart. So I'll focus the heat on a little narrow band, stretch it down a little bit, and then flame cut that into 2 pieces. And we'll repeat the process of puffing that end out to an even bubble, and then popping the hole at the center and flaring it open to that nice cylindrical hollow form that we're looking for. Once again, getting the blow hose attached so that I can puff that out nicely. In the process of making beads like this, it really is just a repetitive kind of going back and forth from heating it up and looking carefully, trying to roll it against the marver, puffing it out so you get that even wall and not letting the bubble puff out beyond that cylindrical form you're looking for. Here we go, puffing out that a little more. This will give us the round bottom that's easy to blow that hole through. You see that little jet of air come through at the last second in the flame. I think there was a little bit of glass to pick away this time, like I was talking about before. And sometimes that's just because the hole blows out a little off to one side, and taking a little glass away from whichever one has too much will help you force everything into a nice cylindrical form. If you let too much glass sit on one lip, it always tries to push out further on that side or hold a little more heat and condense back into a big lump. So, using the marver, pressing it back to a 90-degree angle. You don't want that ring to be all offset as you try to flare it. The straighter the ring is when you go in for the flare, the straighter everything wants to end up at the end. Straighten it there with the back of the jacks, and then use the jacks once again to open it up. Like every time, using the back of the marver, trying to look at that wall as it opens up. We're close now, so we move over to the needle or pencil kind of tipped reamer, that narrow reamer. I really like this one for this sort of flaring. The heavier reamer robs a little too much glass or heat from the glass as you start to do that move, and it can be difficult, at least at this size. The pointed reamer is easiest. There's another angle on it. Just taking the time to make sure that opens up as even as we want. I really do take my time to try and get this perfect, because I really want everything to look pretty close to the same size. Then we got the calipers out again, checking the length. And if it's a little long, I can condense it back and thicken the piece a little bit. And that's why the end product ends up kind of having a variation between, like I said, 3.5 to 4 grams each bead. Just the longer ones, sometimes rather than pick glass away and making them smaller by doing that, the hollows still open more than enough for a necklace or something to pass through, so condensing it back a little bit's an easy way to kind of shrink the length by 1 millimeter or 2. Checking against the calipers again. I think it was right where we wanted it. So now comes the process of warming up that bead one more time and grabbing it with, oh no, we're gonna roll it against the marver at least once more. So there, we pick up the tweezers. This is what I was getting to a moment ago. And we're gonna warm the end of those tweezers up a little bit. I'm holding the edge against the back end of the tweezers just to kind of cool that seal a little bit extra. I'll warm up the end of the tweezers so I can hold the bead. I don't want to touch it with cold metal and rob heat and end up with cracks. But we're going to hold that and then flash the seal in the flame a little bit just to stress it out. If it's cold and put a little bit of heat on there, you'll hear a crack often, and then it's ready to chip away real fast. There's just a bolt on my torch mount that I often tap against. Now, kind of dialing my flame down a bit. I don't want to overheat the lip and condense it back. I just want to polish away any crack or any rough edge from cracking that off of the blow tube. So there we've got the finished bead. I did about 19 of these all together. I had 4 or 5 before I started this video, and I did another 14 with that rod that we started with. Citrine's a really fun color. These UV reactive beads are super sweet. I've always loved the vintage uranium glass out there, and I really love having a borosilicate option to work with as well. Thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one.